to him ensues from his former membership and service as Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. He was also a founder of the National Association for the Advancement of White People, and now all America is saying, holy cow, can this be? What will happen if David Duke becomes governor of Louisiana? He wants you to know a lot of good things. Who will vote for David Duke? Let's start here for just give us a second, and when this audience will have a chance to get in. I heard you tell Larry King that Clarence Thomas's marriage to a white woman bothered you. That's the words you used. It bothered you. Why does it bother you?
Well, I said also that I support Clarence Thomas for the Supreme Court, but I answered honestly. I think intermarriage sometimes between blacks and whites often hurts the children. I think it does, and I think that most black people and most white people in America believe that way. I think a lot of people are afraid to say how they think about some of those issues. But I was just honestly answering the question that they posed to me.
You probably believe in that answer, that you speak for a lot of people who are afraid to say so out loud.
A lot of people are afraid to talk about a lot of issues in this country. There's reverse discrimination going on.
You're foursquare against affirmative action, and in that speech...
I'm against discrimination. I believe equal rights must be for everybody in this country, black or white, and I think human rights must belong to all people.
Do you believe in... do you accept the phrase racial purity? Do you believe in that?
I don't think racial purity is a viable concept. I don't think there's any pure race. There are certainly races, and there's heritages that exist, and there's nothing wrong with black people being proud of their heritage and their race. There's nothing wrong with white people being proud of theirs. I think Jesse Jackson's proud of his people. I want to preserve the heritage of my society. I love the Western Christian civilization that we live in. And I'm concerned about the fact that we seem to be losing some of that heritage. In some schools in this country, you can't even sing Christmas carols anymore. And I don't think that's right.
I would like to show this audience your first visit to our program, Mr. Duke, which happened in 1968, a time when you were... 78. This is 13 years ago. Here is David Duke on the Donahue Show in Chicago, Illinois, being introduced 13 years ago. Also here is David Duke. Mr. Duke is, what is your title?
Grand Wizard or National Director.
You are Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
He's such a nice-looking boy. You know what I mean. I don't mean to be flip about what
I know.
People are surprised, huh?
I guess so, because Hollywood's got this image that anybody who believes in their own race, if they're white and wants to preserve it and have their children go to decent schools and grow up believing in this country, they've got to somehow be old, they got to have a big beer belly, they got to be dirty, and I don't think that's the right image.
You don't even chew tobacco, huh, Mr. Duke?
No, a little spearmint juicy fruit once in a while.
There's nothing there you would disagree with today.
Not too much there, no. Black people, for a lot of the conditions in their communities. Now I blame the liberal social welfare system, which has encouraged illegitimacy. It's broken up black families. We really haven't, we've allowed drug dealers and drug pushers to control housing projects in this country. And I think liberalism has really damaged the black community and the white community as well in our society.
Yes. One of the bills, you introduced 7 bills while you were a member of the Louisiana legislature.
Yes.
Only one of which passed, which disallowed jurors in criminal trials from taking any money for their service. Well, that's a good idea. One that did not pass, you wanted to give welfare mothers $100 a year for having a Norplant contraceptive device surgically inserted. And for as long as the welfare mother retained this implant, she would receive $100 a year.
Actually, the bill in the final form simply gave a bonus for welfare mothers to abstain or simply to practice any kind of birth control, whether it be Norplant or the pill. I believe that the illegitimate welfare birth rate continues to oppress people. I think that when a mother has an illegitimate child, she has less opportunity for jobs and training. I think the taxpayers end up paying for it. Middle-class families have difficulty affording children of their own right now, and yet we're financing a very high illegitimate welfare birth rate. I think we need to encourage responsibility. And the bill had no mandatory provisions whatsoever. It simply tried to encourage welfare mothers and give them a little bit more money if they would be responsible in that area, and I think we've got to be. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got to do that in this country. That's the biggest problem this nation faces. So much of our crime comes from that element, a lot of our drug problems, our educational problems, and if middle-class working couples can be responsible and plan their families, why shouldn't we do that for welfare recipients as well?
The New Orleans, the Times-Picayune of New Orleans, no friend of yours. You've had your problems with this. This paper is foursquare against you. More than that, it's consistently against you in more than one editorial. The Times-Picayune does not want you to be the governor of Louisiana. Some of what they've reported include the following. A report that in December of 1980, you met with a chap by the name of Michael Perdue in a hotel in Louisiana and planned the shipment of 10 mercenaries to the island of Dominica to overthrow the island and establish white supremacist rule on this island, at which place your pal would establish gambling casinos and other money-making ventures. Now, you don't deny that, do you?
Oh, I absolutely deny that. That's not true at all. This fellow Perdue talked about the island of Grenada originally, which later the United States of America went in to overthrow the Marxist leader of that country, and there were anti-communists who were attempting to do that, and later these people talked about Dominica, and but I had no part in that. In fact, they called me before the grand jury, and I testified. And
you took the Fifth Amendment before the grand jury.
Right, exactly right. I had no, there was no illegality whatsoever. There were no indictments, no accusations.
So there was a meeting then. You talked to this guy about this.
Mr. Perdue talked about overthrowing the communist government in Grenada. About a year and a half later, 2 years later, the United States government, under Ronald Reagan, went into Grenada and overthrew the communist regime. And
Duke was not arrested, but he was called before a grand jury. He took the Fifth Amendment, he said, refusing to testify on grounds he might acquit himself. Eventually, 9 of the 10 mercenaries who were recruited and the boat was provided were found guilty. It was called the Bayou of Pigs.
Bayou.
So what are we to understand here? That your cooperation with him was to overthrow the communists in Dominica?
Grenada was what they talked to me about.
So you were a part of then
I'm very anti-communist, and I'm for any movements around the world to overthrow communism, and I think that Castro should have been overthrown years ago. There have been many people who suffered in communist Cuba over the last 20 years, and any efforts to overthrow communism I've always supported and I will continue to support.
You do not deny selling Nazi literature out of your own legislative office while you served in the House.
Right, and I don't deny selling communist literature, but I'm very anti-communist. I had a bookstore, ladies and gentlemen, and every bookstore in New York sells, quote, Nazi literature and communist literature. I sold Christian literature.
Here are some of the titles it is alleged you are selling. From your office as a member of the Louisiana State Legislature, Zoological Subspecies of Man, Racial Differences Between Mental Growth and School Achievement, The Racial History of Scandinavia, and Did 6 Million Really Die? The Truth at Last.
Well, I believe
Vogue magazine, I should say, reports this, and the source for Vogue is Elizabeth Rickey, who's a member of the Republican State Committee.
It's absolutely true. I've sold all those books, and I believe in freedom of speech, and I think that people should be able to make their own minds up about every subject. I sold liberal books and conservative books. But it's a cheap shot to take a candidate for office and pick out a book that you don't like and say, he sold this book, therefore he believes in the book.
Do you think the Holocaust is exaggerated by Jews?
Of course there were terrible atrocities in Europe, and I condemn that. And there were terrible atrocities as well in the Soviet Union. And I oppose any oppression of people. And I think that there's a lot of, the closest thing that I know to the policies of Germany in this country is the so-called affirmative action or quota systems. They had quotas in Germany as well on the basis of race. I don't think you should have racial preference. You talked about one of my bills on Norplant. One of the bills I offered in the Louisiana legislature was to prohibit discrimination based on race, that a person be judged on the basis of their ability and their talents and not their racial background.
Yes.
That's what I believe in.
Now, I know this is chasing you around everywhere you go, and attention coming to him.
Bill?
Well, because, Mr. Duke, it comes as no surprise to you that you have considerable baggage in your own biography here, including a 1991 interview provided by the Louisiana Coalition Against Racism and Nazism, in which you say, people generally deserve what they push on other people. I think they're trying to exterminate our race. I think probably...
No, that's not correct. You already got your facts wrong. It's not 1991. That's totally incorrect.
What year was it that you said this?
Well,
I mean, as a whole, not...
That was
I think probably in a moral sense the Jewish people have been a blight. I mean, as a whole, not every Jew, and they probably deserve to go into the ash bin of history. But saying that and actually shooting or killing people en masse are two different things. So you're against killing Jews, but they are a blight.
Wait a second.
Make your point, sir.
First off, you know, I've said intolerant things in my life, and I would dare say...
I'm sorry, this is a 1986 interview. Okay. 1986, I am correct.
I dare say I've said intolerant things. I regret that. Certainly, sometimes we say things, too, that don't really come out the way that we would mean them or intend them. And I'm sorry for those remarks. But, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've all been intolerant in our lives. I don't have those views today. I believe in equal rights for all. And I have a very clear legislative record on all those subjects, and I'll continue to have that record.
All right, just one more.
Now, can we talk about issues
Yes, we can. Give the host just a chance here. As you know, there's always been some confusion as to just what kind of an American society you envision.
Okay.
For example, you want people, you're against forced anything, whether it's forced hiring, forced busing, forced integrated neighborhoods. And in the interview that we conducted in 1978, 13 years ago, I got into a thing with you about, well, what if there were an all-black neighborhood that wouldn't allow an Anglo-Saxon or a WASP to move in? Would that be okay with you? And just what kind of... And I must say you are consistent, as evidenced by this piece from your interview with us in 1978. Here is the tape.
You would meekly walk away when the realtor said, gee, I'm sorry, we just Anglo-Saxons, there's people here, they have a thing about us, we're going to have to go somewhere else. That would be okay with Mr. Duke.
Absolutely. Why should I force my way of life or my values on the majority over here? There's plenty of other places in this country that I could live maybe with some Negroes that are integrationists. All right, so what are we talking about? I don't want to live with Negroes.
Well, is this part of your change? What am I talking about?
Yes.
I don't want to live with Negroes.
I think it's certainly part of my change. And by the way, I want to make a point here. I think there's a double standard. We had the Clarence Thomas hearings the other day in Washington. If he would have been a liberal, I don't think there'd have been 10 minutes on the sexual harassment charges that he faced. And during the course of those hearings, it was discovered that Clarence Thomas in his younger days, and I'm still a young man, but in his younger days, that he associated with the Black Panthers. I read that in Time magazine. Not one of his strident liberal opponents said that Clarence Thomas shouldn't serve on the Supreme Court because he was once associated with the Black Panthers and had intolerant positions. One of the men who sat in judgment of Clarence Thomas was Robert Byrd, Senator Robert Byrd, who was a former Klansman himself.
I was strong Thurman on the committee, but if you wanted to make that point.
Byrd
was not on the judiciary, but go ahead, make your point.
In the Senate. And another man who sat on the committee himself was Teddy Kennedy. Now, that's one guy to sit in judgment of sexual harassment, huh? One person in Monroe, Louisiana, told me the other day, said Teddy Kennedy doesn't harass women, he kills them. But
may I ask you this?
That's a strong statement, but what I'm trying to say is there's a double standard in our media in this country.
We chase the conservatives and not the liberals.
Well, we do.
Liberals get a pass. And conservatives have to answer to their
What I'm saying is if I were a liberal today, I think what the media would be saying is, they'd be saying, isn't it great that David Duke can overcome his past? That, you know, I'm a Christian person. I think we all evolve in our lives and we all change. I'm still saying things nobody else does say. I mean, very few people in politics. People now starting to talk about the reverse discrimination going on. They're talking about the need to reform the welfare system. They're talking about the fact that forced busing is damaging education. It's causing racial strife. It's causing white flight in our major cities and lowering the tax base and hurting every major city of this country. And again, I've been intolerant, but those of you who've never been intolerant or biased in your lives personally, go ahead, point your finger at me. Maybe my problem is I've had a microphone in front of me when I've said some of those things.
We are in New York City with David Duke, the candidate for governor of Louisiana, who runs on November 16th, Saturday, against former Governor Edwards, a man, Mr. Duke, a man from whom the Republican Party can't run away fast enough. He does not have the support of any major Republican personality in this country. Does that mean that Louisiana will reject him? And who is voting for David Duke in Louisiana? Incidentally, you should know that Governor Edwards was invited to be on our program and declined. And we'll be back with Mr. Duke, the candidate, in just a moment. glad you waited. Go ahead.
Bill, this guy is full of baloney.
Yeah, you wanted to say, briefly.
I don't understand how someone in 1978 can say, oh, down with blacks, down with Jews, and today say, I've changed my mind. Go figure.
Let's hear him make his explanation.
Yeah, I guess you're saying, ma'am, that a leopard can't change his spots. But let me tell you, a leopard's an animal, and a human being can. And I'm a Christian person, and I believe that through the power of Christ and through the power of your faith, and just by growing up and getting more mature in life, that you can certainly become more moderate. I haven't made a 180-degree turn. I haven't become a liberal, but I'm certainly a lot more moderate in my viewpoints and ideas. And I think I reflect that in what I say. And that's not what I'm saying today. And, you know, again, I would, look at the double standard. There are many people in Congress and Senate who've had very radical paths at one time or another. Senator Metzenbaum was a former, well, I would almost call him a Marxist because of his very strong liberal beliefs when he was young. You had many people in the 1960s who were holding up Viet Cong flags while Americans were dying in Vietnam. You know, yet they've become more moderate as they've gotten old, they've grown older. You know, I've always been very strongly right-wing conservative. I'm more moderate, and I hope that you can respect that I can change like most human beings can in this country.
Over here, please.
It's been said that you've attended celebrations commemorating the birthday of Adolf Hitler. I'm curious, what about Hitler, what about his activities, his ideas, his philosophies you admire, and what about him you reject?
I don't admire anything about Hitler. I haven't attended. That's not true. That's one of the many erroneous things that have been reported. I think he was a disaster, not only for the Jewish people, but for all of European civilization. And I believe in less government. And every bill I've offered in the Louisiana legislature has been about less government, more individual freedom. In fact, government's growing in this country every day. Taxes grow. And it seems like our European brothers in Eastern Europe and other parts of Europe are moving toward less government. We move toward more government. That's what I believe in, less government.
In a revealing 1985 interview, the Times-Picayune reminds its readers, you invoke the memory of a country that, quote, had a great sense of gaiety, national purpose and unity, and true brotherhood among their people than any nations ever had, unquote. That country, reminds the newspaper, was the Germany of Adolf Hitler.
Well, Philip, certainly during that period, you know, again, that's out of context. But during that period, many people had recognized that country had a lot of unity. That doesn't mean the programs and policies of that country were good, but they did have unity in that nation, as most historians do recognize at this time. So, again, you can take things out of context, but when are we going to... Let me give you one more example. The man I'm running against right now for governor of Louisiana said some very interesting statements himself back in the 1980s. He went before a newspaper, and they asked him, he says he's a Christian, they asked him if he believed in the resurrection, the life and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And he said no. He said he didn't believe in all that. That's the governor of our state. That's the man who our children get an example from. Later, he put lipstick on the palms of his hands, he put ketchup on his shirt, and he mocked and parodied the crucifixion of Christ. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if I would have done that, I bet you'd have heard about it right now by Phil. The media has said nothing about this in Louisiana. You've heard nothing about this nationally. It's not even a subject. And that's why I say there's a double standard when you stand up for certain ideas and issues in this country, that if you don't, and I tell you, if we don't reform the welfare system in America, we're all going to lose out. Look at the crime in our streets. Look at the drugs, the children born without loving present fathers. We've got to do something to reverse that, and we're not doing it. We're losing the fabric of our country.
Right. If a black person wants to move into a otherwise all-white neighborhood, should he be allowed to do that? Or is it your view that the neighbors who may object should have encoded in law the power to reject that?
No, I think people should move where they want. I think the best qualified person should get the job, promotion, or scholarship.
So you would bring the full weight of the law and the Constitution toward any effort of a black person to live in, for example,
absolutely,
a white neighborhood.
I would.
Would you help?
And I'd also use the Constitution to protect the rights of white people in America as well as blacks. You should not be able to take a test for a post office job in America, and if you're white, have that job or the test score lowered 20 points, or a minority raised 20 points. You should get what you score in that job. And if it's immoral or wrong or a denial of human rights to deny black people their rights as they were denied years ago, I think it's just as morally wrong to deny white people their rights in this country.
And that the all-white neighborhood then should be disallowed under the law in rejecting a minority family from moving in.
That's fine with me, yes, sir.
And we'll be back in just a moment. Mr. Duke, let me say for the record that you asked us not to put photographs of you that might include you in a sheet or a Klansman's hood, and you asked us also not to put up on the screen former statements that you've made.
Well, you said them all anyway, Phil, so, I mean, you don't have to put them up on the screen.
I'm saying...
I mean, that was very clever the way you handled that.
We accommodated...
I wanted to discuss some of the issues. I think this country needs a debate on this liberal social welfare system that's going on.
I just want to say we kept our word, and I think that the audience is entitled to know that we had a deal. I'm not sure everybody in all the journalism schools would agree with this deal. But we've met that. I certainly don't think there's anything you've said on past Donahue shows that you want to back away from, including what we showed you just a moment ago. Okay.
Is it true that if you are elected governor of Louisiana, that you will make Martin Luther King birthday a legal holiday?
You know, I have not even looked at that issue. That's been passed. I'm willing to go along with what the legislature wants to do on that. And I think the people should decide on those issues.
Are you going to make it?
It is a legal holiday right now, and, you know, I have no problem with
Will it be a national holiday? That means that people will be able to celebrate it?
Personally, I don't like the idea of a national holiday for Martin Luther King. I'm just answering your...
And Lincoln and all that. Why can't they have Martin Luther King?
I'm just answering your question. We don't have a single holiday right now for George Washington, not a single one for Abraham Lincoln or Thomas Jefferson. During that period... Martin Luther King often spoke, you know, against our involvement in Vietnam, in which I thought our troops were fighting for liberty in our country at that time. You know, he did a lot of things. He had a lot of associations, which I don't think he deserved a higher ranking than our forefathers. But I will go along with the will of the people. I don't mind people to vote in that issue or their representative bodies on that particular issue. But I don't personally agree with that position.
May I call our viewers' attention to the fact that the presence of media in our studio today, which more than any physical evidence bespeaks the curiosity and the passionate interest that most of this nation has with this candidacy. Why is that? Is this the politics of race? Did Willie Horton in the '88 campaign for president open the door for this? And how many... I've seen people in Louisiana jump up and down with signs, very excited about your candidacy. And what you might call the largely liberal press sees your support as coming from people who are PO'd. They are mad as hell, and they're not going to take it anymore. And you get up there and denounce affirmative action, which is a little like kissing a baby in this day and age, and you say all the right things. But there are a whole bunch of folks out there, Mr. Duke, I'm almost finished, who do not think that you can get the mud off your shoes from your past. Not unlike the first caller who said, how can you... Here's what I think. You comment on this. There will be no blacks appointed in your administration and no Jews.
First off, I'll comment on that. You know, I will appoint people in my administration who can do the best job, regardless of race. And one person, I'll give you an example of somebody who supports me, you know, I work with, and that person is James Meredith. James Meredith was the fellow that integrated Ole Miss. You know, he's been shot at, he's been spit at, he's been hurt. He has fought for civil rights as much as any black leader in this country. And he today believes that the liberal social welfare system is not helping the black community escape poverty. It's not helping build the family together. It's not helping people become responsible in their lives.
Are you there, caller?
Wait.
Yes,
he supports me, and I would be willing to support anyone like him, any other black conservative who agrees with the conservative positions that I believe in. And I think we've got to realize, and one more thing, he told me that when he fought for the civil rights movement, he fought to be chosen on the basis of his merit and not in his race. And he believes the current affirmative action programs of today are a slap in the face of all principles of equal rights for all people.
Are you there, caller?
Yes, I am. Hello, Mr. Duke.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm from Louisiana. And what I want to know is I agree with a lot of what you're saying about the welfare reform. But how will you implement this the legislature doesn't seem to be backing you. And we're just wondering how you would be able to be an effective governor if you don't get the backing of the legislature.
From where are you calling?
I'm from Crowley, Louisiana.
Okay, thank you,
It's
ma'am.
southern state, very at the tip end of the south of Louisiana.
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
Well, ma'am, I'm in the Lions Den up here in New York, but I'm trying to do the best I can. How would I do that? First of all, I had 7 bills in the Louisiana House of Representatives last session legislature. They were not bills about renaming bridges. They were bills about reform of the welfare system, about getting the drugs out of the system, and bills about equal rights for all. Of the 7 bills, all 7 were passed by House committee favorably. All 7. And of the 7, 5 of the 7 passed the entire House of Representatives. I can work with people.
Only 1 became law.
Well, that's true. But I proved I can work with people. My legislative body, I got those bills passed. As a governor, you have a tremendous amount of political leverage to use. You have line item veto in Louisiana. And by the way, even if I couldn't get 1 bill passed, to have a governor to protect us from liberal legislation is important. The same way the President of the United States, with his veto power, protects us from some of the liberal aspects and the high tax aspects of our liberal Democratic Congress.
Over here.
I noticed that you speak about everybody else's double standards. Have you looked at yours lately? Once a hypocrite, always a hypocrite.
Yes,
Ma'am, I mean, I haven't called anybody a hypocrite here, but I don't know how I'm a hypocrite. You think it's easy for me to do what I do? I don't like the danger I face and my children face because of what I do. I stand up and say things. Nobody else. There are many, millions of Americans who think what I think and speak what I speak about in their kitchens and their homes and their churches, but they're afraid to stand up. That's not hypocrisy, ma'am. I think it's courage.
And we'll be back in a moment. Viewers around our country should know that the population of Louisiana, that is to say voting population, no, this is total population, 4.2 million, of whom 1.3 are black and 2.8 are white. Here are total registered voters in Louisiana. 2.2 million souls are registered in the state of Louisiana to vote, of whom 1.6 are white and 625,000 are black, 15,000 other. Look at this. Since all this attention following the David Duke candidacy, in about a little over a month, the reports from Louisiana tell us that we've had an increase in voter registration for this primary, during the primary election, totaling 35,000 white voters and 32,000 black voters. Leaving us with the question, why did these white voters suddenly rush to become registered to vote for or against Mr. Duke? You should also know that the opportunity to register has expired now in Louisiana. So all those Louisianans who are registered to vote will be, at this moment, will be eligible to do so on November 16th. Yes.
I just would like to say that the comment that was just made absolutely makes my blood curdle. I came in with some prejudicial feelings, I have to admit, just from what I had heard. I no longer feel that way. I have to agree with almost everything that I have heard Mr. Duke say at this time. If there was a vote between Mr. Duke and this woman, I'm afraid I would at this time have to vote for Mr. Duke.
Yeah. You're telling us that his 20 minutes on our program has changed yours?
No, it wouldn't. If I was from Louisiana, no, I don't say I could vote for him right now because of this one-on-one conversation type situation.
But it sounds like you're leaning to his favor.
Heaven forbid that I was judged for my past mistakes. I have matured, and if somebody judged me for my past, I would be in a sorry state right now.
And you've just come to this conclusion since our program began?
Oh, no. I just have never heard anything from Mr. Duke at this point. All of what I had voiced my opinion on has been what I have heard directly from the media.
Thank you.
I think we have all suffered great atrocities being African American, Jewish, and all the immigrant groups that's come into this country. We need to find out solutions to start unifying people and stop having people going separate ways over housing, welfare, and other type of political viewpoints. And what are you prepared to do for this?
Well, I think the way you start doing that in this country is you have true equal rights for all. I think affirmative action is causing resentment. I think forced busing has caused racial tension and hurt educational quality and caused white flight. It's caused cities to become resegregated. It's hurt really the tax base in our major cities. You know, I don't think we've brought the races together by these liberal social policies, and I think that's got to be changed. I've said specifically, first off, the Supreme Court's more conservative now. I'm glad of that. They have set new guidelines. We can enforce busing, but we need governors in our states and leaders in our states who will go into federal court, help our school boards, help our we have parishes in Louisiana, counties elsewhere, to go in, you know, fight forced busing, go back to neighborhood schools. That's what you need. You need parental involvement in education in this country.
Are you there, caller?
Yes, I am.
You wanted to say?
I wanted to say that I question David Duke's credibility and integrity because he was not just a member of the KKK. He was the Grand Wizard. I also saw a film called Faces of the Enemy in which the KKK claims to have put David Duke in office, and that publicly he denies supporting them and privately he is supporting them. That's what they claim. And I want to know if he has any comment to make about that.
I repudiate the Klan or any other group that would foment racial intolerance or hatred, and the Klan did not put me in office. And specifically, a number of them have issued very nasty statements toward me.
Right. Please speak to this, Mr. Duke.
Phil, why don't we start talking about issues instead of just quoting all this old stuff?
I'll only take a moment.
Oh, yeah.
From Vogue,
revolt, Phil.
From Vogue magazine, hardly your left-wing pinko outlet here. You espouse through your newspaper, the National Association for the Advancement of White People newspaper, that blacks should be shipped off to New Africa, a strip running from the Louisiana to the Florida coast, and the Jews would go to West Israel, made up of Manhattan and Long Island.
That's just inflammatory, and it's not true.
This was in the mid '80s.
No,
Laurie, shoot it down. No. Tell me that this isn't true.
I've never said such a thing. There was articles, tongue in cheek, that appeared.
Well, it was satire in the white.
Right, but there was
newspaper.
I've never advocated that kind of policy. I don't advocate that kind of policy, and I'm in New York right now.
Yes, you are.
And so. No, so I mean that's the kind of inflammatory things that continue to be said.
So this was a misunderstanding in a newspaper over which you presided and you helped to promote and distribute.
I write letters to the editor, and there's guest articles in many newspapers around this country, but nobody says that newspaper has the opinions of David Duke. I had a publication.
And we'll be back in just a moment. I'm glad you waited. Just take this call.
I think even you changed some things. I mean, I saw you once in a skirt. Maybe you take that back.
David, you've been waiting all day to say that, haven't you?
Yeah.
You feel better now. That's good. Well, it is rating period. Wait till you see what I'll wear next week. You got to watch every show, though. I'm not going to tell you what day. Are you there, caller? Hi, I'm glad you waited.
Yes, I am, Phil. How you doing? First of all, I'd like to say God bless David Duke, and I think that if anybody does not believe that a person can change, hasn't found Christ. And next, I'd like to say, that I have personal knowledge that there's two very large companies that plan on coming to Louisiana if he gets elected.
Right. Are you calling from Louisiana?
Yes, sir, I am, and I will be voting for David, and I've always supported David.
Yeah. Where in Louisiana?
Lafayette.
Yeah, just a question for you, caller.
Yes, sir.
Just out of the blue here. You know how it says you're a Christian?
I am, sir.
You know how it says in God we trust on a dollar bill?
Yes, it does.
Would it be better, in your opinion, if it had said in Jesus Christ we trust?
Our four founding fathers believed in God. The whole Constitution was God. In God we trust. God, Jesus Christ. And I also believe in David Duke.
We should also say...
And I'm not comparing David Duke to Christ. I'm just saying, I believe in Christ. I believe in David Duke.
All right. You make your point. Did you want in here? There's some... Yes, ma'am. You wanted to say.
Hi, yes. I'd like to say that I agree people can change. Also, I want to say that I believe there is reverse discrimination. And I have an example. I grew up in an all-white neighborhood. I've lived in the same house for my 28 years. It is now a mixed neighborhood, and I can't walk a block without being afraid of my life because of the change in the neighborhood.
And you would support his candidacy, would you, if you lived in Louisiana?
Some of the issues, yes.
Thanks.
Yes. I'll get back to you, I promise. Yes, ma'am. You wanted to say briefly.
Yes. I have a question. You say you changed. How can you have changed in the past several years when you're standing up there trying to seem as you're the perfect politician when I think that all you were doing is hiding your white cloak in your pockets?
Yes.
Ma'am, you know, again, I don't see, you know, what you say, I feel the hatred coming from you. I don't feel the hatred coming. Ma'am, I'm not against you. I want you to have a decent life. I want you to have a safe neighborhood. I don't want you to have drugs in that neighborhood. I'm concerned about the illegitimacy in all the communities. If we don't do something to address this problem, you don't have a future. I don't have a future. My children are not going to have a good country to live in. I'm not against you.
I'm against what you believe.
And I'm not going to take a cheap shot at you. I'm not going to tell you have a Black Panther beret in your back pocket because I disagree with you.
You don't have to take a cheap shot at me, but what I'm saying is that you're standing up there trying to say that you are misunderstood, and I don't think you're misunderstood. If you're so changed, why is it that your own politician people, they don't even want to be in the same room with you? You change that much, they don't want to be in the same room with you?
Let me tell you, a lot of people. I'm a member, now let me get something straight here. I'm a member of the Republican delegation in the legislature. They're in the same room with me. They shake hands with me. They've co-sponsored lots of my legislation in the legislature. I'm not the pariah. And I can't understand any Republican supporting a liberal Democrat like Edwin Edwards. Edwin Edwards supported openly the platform of Jesse Jackson in the last presidential election. I supported Clarence Thomas.
Over here.
I cannot understand a Republican supporting a person that would support Jackson.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Duke, how can you say you don't want government in people's lives on one hand and then talk about putting Norplant into women on the other? That's what makes you a hypocrite. And the only thing you've changed is your nose. Your plastic surgery looks terrible.
Wait. I hope the people who accuse me of intolerance and meanness would listen to some of my critics. I wish you'd listen. Why can't we talk about issues and ideas? I've never called for mandatory Norplant or birth control for anyone. But I think, ma'am, do you think it's good that we have children right now being born from drug addicts? Where these kids are born with hooked on drugs. Wait. Do you think it's good that children born without loving present fathers in climates of abuse and neglect? Do you think that's going to be good for this country? Do you think it's good for you?
Going to solve that problem?
Because I think we should encourage people on welfare to be responsible, to act morally, and if they can't do that, at least be good. If you can't be good, at least be responsible in your lives.
Norplant won't do that.
It's a form of birth control, isn't it? Is it? If it's okay for married couples, why isn't it okay for welfare recipients?
Yes.
Ma'am?
You have mentioned your children. I'd like to know how you would feel if your son or your daughter would be interested in marrying a Jew or a Black person.
Well, let me say something. Most Jewish people that I've talked to in my life, and I respect the Jewish people, I do, generally speaking, want their child to marry within the faith. I would tend to want my child to marry Christian and practice the Christian faith. I wouldn't hate my child if they did that. I wouldn't disown my child, but I would tend to want my child to marry within the faith and within my heritage as well.
Marrying a Black Christian?
Look, again, I think Black people can find salvation in Christ the same as white people. I do respect my heritage. I think it's better if people...
It would not bother you in the least.
It would bother me. It would bother me if I have two wonderful daughters. I'm proud of them. And I want to see the continuation of my heritage and values go on generation to generation. Now, I say this honestly. Now, I don't think this is getting me any votes, obviously. But I speak the truth. And we need to have some people in politics who say the honest truth. I think there's a lot of politicians right here in New York City. Right here in New York City who think that way, but they wouldn't dare say it. The difference is I say what I believe honestly.
And we'll be back in a moment.
Thank you.
You wanted to say?
Mr. Duke, I would like to know, do you own any pets? And if so, what are they? And if not, why not?
Why do you want to know that?
You can tell a lot from a person by the pets that they own.
Is that a thing?
Well, I have.
Do you?
I travel a lot, so it's hard for me to give attention to a dog that I'd like to have a dog, but I travel so much I can't give attention to an animal that well. So I have a cat. It's a little tabby cat. and I love her very much.
Yeah. What do you see What do you sit in a Thanksgiving table with a black person?
I'm sorry?
Would you sit on the table on a Thanksgiving day with a black person?
Of course I would, and I have 1,000 times, sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you think that coming from the background that you're coming from, like the narrow-mindedness or that's associated with the KKK, you can fairly represent the people in Louisiana?
I think so, and again, ma'am, I would think if we look in our own lives that there's times of intolerance in our lives and times of bias in our lives. I think I can. In fact, I think my background proves that people can trust me because I've always said what I believe, whether it be popular or unpopular, and that's the kind of change that we need.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Duke, a question.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
If you want an office in Louisiana, how come you're stumping in New York?
I invited him and he accepted.
I'm here because of this. My opponent has lots of special interest money. I have very small contributions, a lot of them. And the only way that I can really reach the people, this show is aired in every city of Louisiana. And this is a way for me not only to reach the people, I guess, of the country, but more importantly for me, to be able to get my message out. And all my people in my campaign said, don't do it because it's dangerous. You're in a situation where they can ask you any question, and it's not a controlled environment. But that's the only thing I can do. That's the only way I can reach people because I don't have the big money and the special interests, and I don't have the endorsements. So that's why I'm here. And by the way, I love New York, but I sure wouldn't trade Louisiana for it. And the people who condemn me and what I do, I'd like you to look at your own city, the crime, the violence, the racial intolerance. I mean, look at what's going on over here. I wouldn't look at Louisiana and point your fingers at our state. Our people are a great people, and I hope you all come down and visit us after I'm gone.
Are you there, caller? Hi.
I'm here, Phil.
What do you want to say briefly?
This guy keeps painting himself as a Christian.
Yes.
And his values and views are the furthest things from it. I mean, being a Christian is not synonymous with being a racist, and that's what this guy is.
Are you there, caller? Hi.
I'm not a racist.
Are you there, caller?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I know that Mr. Duke, he seems to be a Christian and all now. He says that he's a Christian. People they do change. And who's to say that Mr. Duke will not change back to his old form of thinking once he's in office?
Yeah, and we'll be back in just a moment. With not much time, do you feel you've been treated fairly here?
Yes, and I just want to tell all of you that I know this is the first time you've had a chance to hear my side of some of these things, and I appreciate your decency toward me. And people in my state are being told that nobody in the country agrees with what I'm saying and doing. I don't believe that's true. And if anybody listening anywhere in the country, write Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the state capital, it's David Duke State Capital, Baton Rouge, 70803, and let my state know that you like what I'm saying.